Good morning, everybody. And it's impressive that you all came so early in the morning. And I hope to not disappoint you and hope to give you all that you wanted to know. So the title for today is Identifying PIK3CA, AKT1, and PTEN altered hormone receptor in hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative advanced breast cancers. This is sponsored by AstraZeneca. I'm Dr. Savitri Krishnamurthy. I'm a professor of pathology at the University of Texas, MD Anderson Cancer Center. I practice breast surgical pathology, cytopathology, and I'm involved in patient care, education, and research. In recent years, I'm also very much involved in digital pathology and artificial intelligence aided tools for the field of pathology. Yeah. This doesn't advance very well. Let's see. Okay. So today's topic is PIK3CA, AKT1, and or PTEN alteration status in tumor DNA that may indicate eligibility for treatment with TrueCap, which is capivasertib, plus fulvestrant in hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative advanced breast cancers following progression. So here we also want to stress that identification of PIK3CA, AKT1 or PTEN alterations with the Foundation 1 CDX, a clinically validated and FDA approved next-gen sequencing testing. So before I start, I also want to kind of give an important product information because we are talking about this agent TrueCap. It is good to understand that this is contraindicated in patients with severe hypersensitivity to this agent. And the indications for usage is that it is indicated for treatment of adult patients with hormone receptor positive, human epidermal growth factor receptor 2 negative, locally advanced, or metastatic breast cancer with one or more of this alteration. You'll hear about this today because we want to kind of make it very clear to you as to how, as pathologists, you can facilitate in this identification and also bring up this FDA-approved test that can be used for detecting these abnormalities. And this agent has a role, as I said, in patients with hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative breast cancers who have been on one endocrine-based treatment in a metastatic setting or who developed recurrence within 12 months of completing adjuvant therapy. So the learning objectives for today's talk is to understand the importance of identifying these actionable biomarkers in the PI3 kinase AKT PTEN pathway using NGS testing. Second is to recognize the clinical advancements in hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative, locally advanced and metastatic breast cancers, and an introduction to this agent TrueCap plus fulvestrant, the modes of action of using these two agents, and what is the basis of all this? As you all know that in our medical practice, evidence is everything. And before you give anything to your patients, clinical trials are very important. So what is the clinical trial that forms the basis of all that I'm talking today is the Capitello 291 study overview, which shows the efficacy of the results of this combination in these patients, as well as touch upon some of the adverse reactions that happens when you use TrueCap. Thirdly, understand how to address the key challenges in the NGS process that may prevent successful biomarker testing. I know that all of you are pathologists, so I think it would be important to discuss and understand what can we do to enable patients to get these kind of agents that can improve their survival. And lastly, to discuss the role of pathologists in molecular biomarker testing. I know that all of us are involved in making a diagnosis in our routine pathology life. But you know, you also play a great role in enabling the entire medical practice to select patients for targeted therapy. So that is the learning objectives for today's presentation. So basically, let's first start to understand the PI3 kinase AKT-PTEN pathway in hormone receptor positive HER2 negative advanced breast cancer. Most of you may have heard this, but this is just an overview that I'll be giving you. So before we start, we just want to gather some basic information from you. So we want to know from you approximately what percentage of patients with hormone receptor positive breast cancer have one or more PI3 kinase, AKT, and PTEN alterations. Please punch in your answers. Very good, very good. Okay, let's move on. I think people are still putting, I'll wait maybe a few minutes. That's good. I think, so you all, this is nothing new for you, just an overview. So as you all know, the PI3 kinase AKT-PTEN pathway is frequently activated in hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative advanced breast cancers. So this is like well reported, well recognized in the field that this pathway is the key signaling pathway in breast cancer. And this PI3 kinase AKT-PTEN pathway is the key pathway that is involved in breast cancer cellular proliferation. In addition, as you all know, estrogen receptor is a driver of breast cancer, right? So in addition to the PI3 kinase AKT and PTEN pathway, there is also the estrogen receptor signaling pathway. So as you all know, estrogen receptors regulate both genomic and non-genomic pathways and contribute to the various, oncogenic pathways in the tumor cells to create the increased growth and provide the survival advantage to the tumor cells. Nevertheless, both PI3 kinase AKT-PTEN pathway and the ER pathway both can enable amplified signaling to increase cell proliferation, tumor growth, independent of each other. They are not dependent on each other. So that is the basis, you see, why you use two agents to hit and negate all these effects of these two pathways. So if you look at this pathway, alterations in the PI3 kinase AKT-PTEN pathway causing hyperactivation of the cellular signals includes key alterations that happens in these three genomic markers. And based on those alterations, there is obviously a common pathway that leads to this proliferation, and you can see in that image where, if PI3 kinase, PTEN, if there is genomic abnormalities that leads to hyperactivation, finally it all comes down to AKT stimulating, taking it through mTOR into the nucleus of the tumor cell and leading to all the effects that gives the tumor cell a survival advantage. So what are the genomic abnormalities in PI3 kinase? PIK3CA abnormalities includes point mutations of PIK3CA. So that results in gain of function of PI3 kinase. With respect to AKT, again point mutations in AKT1 isoform leads to gain in function of AKT. And with respect to PTEN, there are several different kinds of genomic abnormalities that includes not just point mutations, but also large deletions and genomic rearrangements that involving PTEN. So basically, based on all these kinds of genomic abnormalities, there is loss of function of PTEN. So the question that you were asked is, this is the answer. So up to 50% of patients with hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative advanced breast cancer have one or more abnormalities in these three genomic biomarkers, PIK3CA, AKT1, and PTEN. So overall, if you see, up to 50% of patients will have abnormalities of one or other of these molecules. If you take them independently, approximately 40% will have PIK3CA mutations, and 5% AKT, 5% PTEN alterations. But overall, if you take, around 50% will have these abnormalities. Why is this very important to understand? It's important because this is not a small number of patients, right? You can make a difference in a large percentage of patients' lives in a metastatic setting. So I think this knowledge is very important. So to go into further details, it is important to understand, for those of you who practice signing out molecular pathology, they will be familiar with this. But for general surgical pathologists who does not sign out molecular pathology, this will be useful. If you look at the abnormalities and what these kind of drugs that has been developed in this clinical trial can do, there are very specific requirements that has to be met before you can kind of think that the drug will act. So in this slide, you can clearly see that if you take AKT1 single nucleotide variants that happens, it is in E17K. And then for PIK3CA, you see all the abnormalities. There are very specific abnormalities, single nucleotide variants that happens that makes a patient eligible. And similarly for PTEN, I mentioned that it is not just point mutations, there is copy number alterations, there is rearrangements. All these different kind of genomic abnormalities are required to be identified before one can think of giving these kind of drugs to the patients. So let's now talk about identifying biomarkers in breast cancer. So some fundamental concepts, as you all know, that actionable biomarkers are defined as genetic alterations that are functional in driving malignancy and that can be targeted by FDA-approved targeted therapies. You may hear this word commonly in practice, right? This is an actionable biomarker. So when we say it is actionable, means that you can do something for the patient by selecting a drug that is FDA approved for targeted therapy. So fundamental concept, when we talk about biomarkers in anything, we talk about two things, right? Prognostic biomarker, predictive biomarker. Similarly, for breast cancer, we like to identify prognostic biomarker and predictive biomarker. So these PIK3CA, AKT, PTEN abnormalities that we are talking about today are genomic alteration that leads to kind of prescribing drugs for a given patient to predict, right, response. So it is a predictive biomarker. Nevertheless, prognostic biomarkers are those that kind of give an idea about disease recurrence or disease progression. For example, breast cancer is positive for HER2 is historically and with all the evidence that we have in the reported literature, it is an excellent prognostic biomarker. ER-PR is an excellent prognostic biomarker because if ER decreases, it indicates poor prognosis. But these are also predictive biomarkers. So it's good to understand that kind of concept. So next is that how do we identify these kind of biomarkers? All of you, I think, are familiar with identification of biomarkers by immunohistochemistry, which is like bread and butter of a pathology practice, right? ER, PR, HER2, Ki67. These days, we also do PD-L1 and microsatellite instability also by immunohistochemistry. However, as you all know, the genomic biomarkers have to be done by genomic testing. And when we talk about genomic testings in today's world, there is quantitative PCR as well as next generation sequencing. Perhaps in all pathology practices, people have moved into the next gen sequencing space and are not in the qPCR space. Why is that? So this is again a very basic concept. What is the advantage, limitation of using each of these modalities for identifying genomic biomarkers? Let's start with qPCR, right? Like, traditionally been available to pathology practices for a very long time. It is very sensitive, it is quick and simple, easy to set up, easy to run, and then you don't need very sophisticated infrastructure or too much cost to set it up. But there are some downsides to using just quantitative PCR-based testing. It examines only very limited kind of genomic abnormalities, right? I showed you the PIK3CA, so many variants that can make a patient eligible. It is not so easy to set up your PCR to identify each and every of those variants of PIK3CA. Very low discovery power. Obviously, it's not high throughput, right? You put your primers that you want to ask questions and you get your answers. There is no discovery there, right? Of, okay, globally, can I hit at something? Can I find a trend in something and do research to kind of find targets? All that is not possible. And low variant resolution, as I mentioned. On the other hand, as I said, next generation sequencing is like now part and parcel of our practice. So high discovery power because it is very high throughput, very comprehensive genomic coverage, high analytical sensitivity and resolution to identify different genomic variants. And very little amount of DNA is required to get large amounts of data, and you can screen multiple targets simultaneously. Perhaps that is one of the key reasons all practices consider NGS for identifying genomic biomarkers, not just for breast, but as you all know, also for lung. For lung cancers, without that, you cannot start treatment. In breast, in a metastatic setting, you need it, but for many tumors, you need it from the get-go. Also, less cost effective when interrogating a low number of samples. So that is the downside of NGS. It is expensive test. So if you are doing occasional specimens in your practice, it may not be worth your money to set it up because you're not going to recover the cost. And it requires a very dedicated data handling. Bioinformatics has to be really good because these days, that is what, molecular pathology results means, that you need to have good bioinformatics supports to interrogate the large amount of data that comes out of NGS testing. So the NGS panel testing process uses tissue samples, right? Formalin fixed paraffin embedded tissue. So as pathologists, I think all pathologists play a key role in this process, even if they don't sign out the molecular pathology. There are different styles of establishment in different practices, be it community practice or be it academic practices. So the first and foremost thing is sample preparation, right? So the tissue is formalin fixed, paraffin embedded, and remember, in all practices, standard fixation methods, that means the pre-analytic factors has to be taken care of very carefully, and tissue specimen should be prepared, and either for your own kind of institution where you are sending, or it is a send-out test. I think this process has to be set up very well. Next is performing the test. So NGS testing can be done in-house or it can be sent to a commercial lab. There are several commercial labs that do, and as I said, the FoundationOne DX is the FDA-approved kind of next-gen sequencing testing that is offered for selecting targeted agents for targeted therapy. But you can also do in-house and set it up. An example, as I said, of the FDA is the FoundationOne CDX test. And some NGS panels, such as the FoundationOne CDX panels, have a turnaround time of around 8.8 days or 9 days, which is not bad at all. Interpreting the results. So that is the third step in the process, right? You've performed your NGS testing, then verbalizing the results very carefully and nicely to the oncologist is very important. Biomarkers are classified according to their clinical significance into kind of 3 types. Actionable biomarkers detected. So as I said, what are actionable biomarkers? That means biomarkers that for which there is some drug available to be given to the patient. Once you identify them, it makes it easy for the oncologist to give that agent to the patient. Potentially actionable biomarker detected. That means agents for which there are not really good agents for now, but down the lane perhaps it would be important. And the third is no actionable biomarker detected. So the results of the testing may be such that nothing came out as actionable or even potentially actionable for a patient. So the last is clinical implication. Results from the NGS report may inform, as I said, it's no-brainer, right? It helps the oncologist do the treatment appropriately. And then potential treatment resistance and disease progression also can be known through some of the genomic markers. And clinical trial eligibility. There are several clinical trials running and the oncologist gets to know what abnormality is there to accrue a patient in a clinical trial. So I think these are the steps for the NGS testing. So now let's understand a little bit about this new agent, which is capivasertib, which is TrueCap, and let's see whether you all know something. If you don't know, no problem, you'll learn about it. On a scale of 1 to 5, let me show you this. On a scale of 1 to 5, how familiar are you with the following? TrueCap and Foundation 1 CDX. If you can punch in your results, we'll know where we are. Very good, very good. Okay, so let's learn a little bit. I think this doesn't move that easily. Good, I think, yeah. Okay. So TrueCap plus fulvestrant is the first and only combination to leverage the dual power of AKT inhibition and endocrine receptor downregulation. I think I introduced this to you, right? That there are two pathways, signaling pathways. One is the ER pathway and the other is the PI3 kinase AKT-PTEN pathway. Both are independent of each other. So both have to be taken care of to make sure that the tumor cell does not proliferate. So how do we interrogate these both signaling pathways? And that is what this combination does, TrueCap plus fulvestrant. So TrueCap is an FDA-approved inhibitor of all three isoforms of AKT, AKT1, AKT2, and AKT3. So in preclinical models, TrueCap targets AKT and blocks the signaling that happens when any of these biomarkers, that is PI3 kinase, PTEN, or AKT, becomes abnormal. And on the other hand, for the ER pathway, you have fulvestrant, which is an FDA-approved estrogen receptor antagonist. Fulvestrant binds to and causes downregulation of ER. So this is the way how you interrogate both the pathways. Okay. So TrueCap plus fulvestrant, as I said, is the first and only combination to target AKT and inhibit the signaling pathways of PI3 kinase, AKT, and PTEN. And by targeting AKT, this agent works in tumors with abnormalities in either three of these markers by blocking the signaling pathways. And fulvestrant is an estrogen receptor antagonist that binds to and causes downregulation of ER. So when you add both these agents and give them to the patients, it can target, inhibit, and downregulate the oncogenic signaling pathways, resulting in control of all the effects that we don't want, that is cell proliferation, increase in the metabolism, and providing survival advantage to the tumor cells. So now let's talk a little bit about, I think you want to understand what is the basis of all this? How did all this happen? So let's learn a little bit about the CAPItello 291 trial, the clinical trial, which was a phase 3 randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study that clearly showed that this agent is important. So I know that you're all pathologists, so I don't want to go too much into everything, but just to kind of give you an overview is that in this trial, there was key, as you know, in any clinical trial, you need key inclusion criteria and key exclusion criteria. So they were very clear that you did not include patients who were already treated with a PI3 kinase inhibitor or an AKT inhibitor or an mTOR inhibitor or another kind of estrogen antagonism using SERDs. And the key inclusion criteria was, I think I mentioned a couple of times, disease progression while on endocrine therapy, at least one previous endocrine therapy, or less than 12 months from end of adjuvant endocrine therapy, or progression while on prior adjuvant therapy for locally advanced or metastatic breast cancer. And so obviously these patients should not have got more than 2 lines of previous therapy. And, so there are specific requirements that prior CD4K6 inhibitors are allowed, which is good because these days all patients with metastatic breast cancer, hormone receptor positive, get the CD4K6 inhibitors, right? ribociclib and those kind of agents. And, the patient should not be diabetic. I think it is important that the hemoglobin A1C is less than 8%, very important, because one of the side effects is that it increases the blood sugar levels in some patients. So it is good that TrueCap is given as tablets to the patients, and fulvestrant is given by injection, and there are specific kind of schedules how it is given. So the endpoints is very important. There is dual primary endpoints of progression-free survival by investigator assessment. Again, very interesting in the trial. That makes it easy in any kind of center when you have the study. It is how the principal investigator puts down the results. So they want to see the advantage of progression-free survival in overall population as well as in patients who have this abnormality. You know why that was done? To show that what do you gain by establishing the results of PI3 kinase AKT and PTEN versus if you just gave the drug without kind of doing anything. So interestingly, they want to capture all the patients. So both was done to know the advantage of doing genomic testing and how that will benefit the patients. There were a couple of secondary endpoints, that is overall survival, objective response rate, safety, and duration of response. Now, let's see the results. Very interesting. I think this, yeah. So if you look at this, this study, the bottom line is that when they gave both these, so there was a placebo with only fulvestrant and another arm with fulvestrant and TrueCap. And interestingly, in this clinical trial, a very important statistically significant advantage was seen in patients who were given TrueCap and fulvestrant with the genomic abnormalities compared to patients who were given the drug without the genomic abnormality. So this clearly showed, like see here, the advantage is 7.3 months additional versus 3.1 months if there were no genomic abnormalities detected in the patient. So based on this statistically significant advantage that comes to a given patient who has genomic abnormalities in the tumor cells in this pathway, clearly established and led to FDA approval of this combination based on this trial that clearly showed that once patients have these abnormalities, then they benefit. And you can see here the hazard ratio is very, very significant. And between the two groups, I think clearly this establishes the benefit that patients derive if they were given these two combinations with the genomic abnormality. So again, a little bit more details of this is, obviously, any kind of drug that you give the patients, you hear all these things in the news all the time, right? This drug is available for this, that is this, but, you can have da-da-da-da-da. So I think, unfortunately, any kind of intervention that you do comes with some side effects, right? So it is good to understand that adverse reactions happened in more than 10%, all grades in patients with PIK3CA, AKT, or PTEN altered tumors. So it is good to understand that what were the adverse reactions. I think the safety population in the CAPItello 291 trial included 155 patients on the experimental arm that received TrueCap and fulvestrant, and 133 patients in the control arm that received only placebo and fulvestrant. And it is important to understand that the combination had to be discontinued in 10% of patients because they developed adverse reactions. The most frequent, more than or equal to 2% adverse reaction that led to discontinuation was cutaneous adverse reactions. So if you look on the other side, the adverse reactions that happens is GI disorders, particularly diarrhea, skin and subcutaneous tissue disorders, and hyperglycemia, as I mentioned, and several others that are of lower kind of grade. But most important is GI diarrhea, skin lesions, skin abnormalities, and hyperglycemia. So next is, I think, so the safety and tolerability profile of this combination in CAPItello trial, I think here it is clearly stated. I think for a pathology audience, this may not be of great interest, but again, As I mentioned, clearly the glucose abnormality, that means hyperglycemia, and decrease in lymphocytes, that's another thing, and some of the other electrolyte imbalances and others is listed here. So what is more important, now I want to talk about this, right? So the Foundation One CDX is an FDA-approved tissue-based next-gen sequencing panel used to detect the genomic abnormalities that will lead to selection of a patient for this combination. So it's a quantitative NGS-based in vitro diagnostic test. It detects mutations in more than 300 genes. All NGS panels are high throughput. You get large number of genes that can be evaluated. What is the starting material required? It is your standard formalin-fixed paraffin-embedded material. And the turnaround time is around, 8.8 to 9 days. And what does it do? It not only tells you about PIK3CA, AKT, and PTEN, but it gives indications for FDA-approved therapies and cancer mutations with clinical or potential clinical significance. So I think, you can see the output of the genomic testing for an oncologist. This is very, very easy to see what is actionable, what they can give, and what is potentially actionable, and what there is not there for them not to give the patients anything. So I think, here again, I stress that it is given like tablets, 200 milligram twice daily, and this is of more interest to oncologists, but for us, I think, it is just a general idea that that is how that is given, and fulvestrant is given like an injection. Okay, so now comes our important part that I think this also is like, specifications for the patients, how to take the drug. I'll move on to the tissue part, which is what is important for us. Okay, so I'll also talk a little bit, which is of interest to all of you, is an overview of the NCCN clinical practice guidelines and oncology recommendations for biomarker testing in breast cancer. I think this is something that is very important for all of you in your practice. And so the NCCN guidelines currently recommend testing for the following biomarkers in advanced breast cancer or metastatic breast cancer. Of course, there is PIK3CA activating mutations. And the NCCN says you can either use PCR or next generation sequencing testing, but you know that everybody uses NGS for that. Next is AKT1 activating mutation. Everybody uses NGS. PTEN alterations, people use NGS. And we'll discuss a little bit, because immuno is also available, but that does not lead to selection of the patients. And we'll talk a little bit about that. ESR1 mutations, you can either do NGS or PCR. Many people do blood-based, right? Like circulating tumor DNA that is used for ESR1 mutations. So digital PCR is used. So I think that is allowed. NTRK mutation, you can either do FISH, NGS, or PCR. And microsatellite instability, IHC is allowed, NGS is allowed, or PCR. I think in my institution we use IHC, but I think, and NGS when required. Tumor mutation burden and RET fusion by NGS. So these are the actionable biomarkers recommended by NCCN for locally advanced breast cancers or metastatic breast cancers. Now, let's lead to talk about important things that has implications for our pathology practice. Despite guideline recommendations, many patients with metastatic breast cancer do not get NGS testing. So who is to blame for this? You have to think about it, right? So you can see that only 40% of patients with metastatic breast cancer receive NGS testing, and this is a data that was gathered like between 2017 and 2023. Perhaps things may change a little bit this year because more and more people are doing it. But interestingly, you can see between 2019 and 2023, there was a big shift. So it is shifting, it is coming. People are understanding that this is very important. I always tell my trainees, I have been training people for a long time. So the era of just making a diagnosis is over, right, as we all know. If you kind of make a mistake or do not do ER/PR, HER2 evaluation correctly, your credibility is not there as a smart breast pathologist. Similarly, we don't do much service to patients if we don't act on all the stuff that we can do to make a difference in the patient's lives. So now, the next part of the talk is something very important to all the pathologists. So let's hear about what are the challenges for NGS testing in routine practice, right? And so we'll talk about that. Before talking about that, we want to hear from you. Which of the following processes do you utilize in practice currently? Rapid on-site evaluation, the 4R approach, which is right information, right care to the patient at the right time, split tissue into multiple cassettes, QA, QC for adequacy, none of the above. We like to hear from you, see what you mark. Very good, I like that. But still see none of the above in some people. That has to change, I think. Very good. So now let's hear about this, I think, which will be important for you. So, so it is very clear that I spoke about a lot of things, right? I spoke about the PI3 kinase AKT pathway, the signaling pathway, the ER pathway, what it does, how the clinical trial brought about this combination, how FDA approved the drug, how there is a companion diagnostic testing, all that we spoke about. Now, collecting adequate tissue upfront may prevent the need for rebiopsy in the future, right? So in any patient with metastatic breast cancer or locally advanced breast cancer, whenever biopsy is done, I think it is very important to make sure that you collect the tissue. So what are the steps and what can be done? So let's see that. So initial histopathological analysis is very important, as you all know, right? So you need to kind of score your case and see whether there is adequate tissue for molecular diagnostics. So all of us want to see at least 20% tumor cellularity in the tissue to enable performing molecular testing. 20% is the number that has to be there in your tissue to kind of get a successful molecular testing result. Communication with tissue proceduralist. Usually it is a radiologist who collects, right? The interventional radiology guided core biopsy or FNA of metastatic tumors. So at that time, doing immediate assessment is important to guide these people who are collecting to say how many cores have to be collected. That is very important. This communication with the tissue proceduralist, who is usually a radiologist, is important. Preserving adequate tissue. So obviously, upfront, when you have a metastatic breast cancer, it has to be done. NGS has to be done. It is good to be ready with unstained sections from the get-go when you get your H&E slides. And creating multiple cassettes. It is not good to put all 6 cores all in one cassette. It is good to split it, right? So that you use some for immuno and some for molecular testing. It's not good to put everything in one cassette and exhaust the block. Minimum tumor content, as I said, important to score it, that, what is the tumor percentage in a core? In my institution, we write tumor bank, which is the block for biomarker testing. But even in my practice, we are now thinking that it would be good to even put the percentage of tumor there so that, people know whether it is good or bad for molecular testing. Last but not the least, decalcified samples. You know that patients with breast cancer have bone metastasis quite a bit. And once you decalcify bone, the harsh treatment may kind of damage your tissue and not be good for. So what do you do there? What is the guideline or what is the recommendation for bone specimens? These are all the important things that you have to keep in mind to help. So now let's see, the next thing is, doing rapid assessment is very useful, right? So ensure that a pathologist is on site. It may not be always possible, but I think it certainly helps. And specimens include, generally in places they do touch prep of the core, but in many institutions like my institution, an FNA and core is performed, where FNA is a surrogate of the core. So if the FNA is poor in cellularity, the core that is procured from there is really going to be not that great. So you have to get more cores in such cases. Diagnostic assessments are performed for specimens categorizing samples as adequate or non-adequate. So as I said, from the get-go, if you do that, you facilitate the process. Touch preparation is commonly used on core biopsies during rows to confirm the adequacy of specimens. As I said, that is a common practice where people don't do FNA as a surrogate of the core. So now let's see the next thing. So reducing NGS delays may result in timely initiation of appropriate treatment. The first thing to understand is when you get a case of metastatic breast cancer, making a diagnosis is 1 minute, right? Metastatic breast cancer, that's not enough. You have to kind of do the next thing, that means initiate the NGS process. So how can we reduce the NGS delays? Improve time to NGS ordering. So send the initial pathology report to the oncologist prior to the appointment. Order the NGS test right away. That means let the oncologist know that that's what is going on. Improve specimen receipt time. So negotiate with your NGS vendor to see that you send the specimen very quickly. If you do in-house, again, I see even in my institution, there is always the discussion of how the turnaround time for MDL is delayed, what can be done to improve turnaround. It is a problem everywhere. But I think we all together can make a difference. Improve multidisciplinary tumor, coordination. That means if you have an oncologist, radiologist, surgeon, and pathologist in a team, it is important to implement the 4R approach. So what is the 4R approach? It's a great team-based approach to do the right information, the right care for the patient and right time. That means everything has to be done in a very coordinated way. Establish a project plan which can clearly define the sequencing and timing of tasks. Ensure that each member has clearly assigned responsibilities, because together we are a team to treat the patient. So if you work in isolation, it's not going to help. Expedite oncologist review. Implement a weekly automated report of newly diagnosed patients. Maybe that will help an oncologist know that, okay, metastatic breast cancer, we are going to sign out, let's do this. Encourage periodic feedback. I think it is very important. I know that not all pathologists sign molecular pathology, but the pathologist who is sitting and making the diagnosis of metastatic breast cancer, who is scoring the amount of tumor in the core, needs to know what happened to their case. I think the more you give that information, the better it is. They understand what they are doing. If you don't do that, then, it doesn't seem to work that well. So now let's see the next thing. I think pathologists can play a key role in addressing challenges within the NGS testing pathway. So we are the people who can make a difference. So the first is proactively communicate with the tissue proceduralist, as I said, the radiologist, and split the tissue into multiple cassettes to ensure sufficient tumor has been collected. Once you don't do that, you've lost the opportunity. Either you call it non-diagnostic or you just make the diagnosis of very limited tumor. It doesn't help. Consider implementing adequacy assessments of all core biopsies and FNA. I know that I practice cytology also. In all practices, I think EBA's cases, rapid assessment is done for lung. But for solid tumors, usually it is really not done, because majority of the times they come back adequate. But, that doesn't mean it is adequate 100%. And then lastly, use as I said, the 4R approach, the team-based approach, to establish a project plan which clearly defines the sequencing and timing of the tasks. So now let's go through some case studies. And I'll run by some cases. This is a 72-year-old patient with ER-positive, PR-positive, HER2-negative breast cancer with bone metastasis. As you all know, bone metastasis is very common in ER, PR-positive, HER2-negative patients. So this is a biopsy of the iliac bone lesion. And so if you look at this, so obviously see the crushed, very little tissue. It does not form 20% of the tumor. So then what do? So no molecular testing on this patient. So luckily, as I said, in my practice, FNA is also done. And also, for majority of patients with metastatic cancers, doing concurrent FNA helps. You know why? Because metastatic patients already have gotten chemotherapy. There is usually a lot of fibrosis associated with the tumor. The core comes back with less amount of tumor. There is all these kind of problems. So if you do an FNA, then many times you get a lot of tumor cells on your FNA, and you can make a good cell block. And all these places where molecular testing is done, they take cell blocks. But in some institutions, even these smears can be used for the tumor cells. But even without the smears, a good cell block that is prepared of the bone specimens. So that is what happened in this patient. So the FNA was very cellular, and it had more than 50% tumor cellularity that enabled molecular testing. So let me show you a second case. This is a 78-year-old patient with YPT4 breast cancer, YPN1, and ER was 90% positive, PR 15%, HER2 negative. This is a metastatic cancer in the lymph node with clearly more than 20% tumor cellularity. NGS testing was done. PIK3CA somatic mutation in exon 21 was identified that enabled the patient to get targeted therapy. So with that, I move to the last part, the role of pathologists in molecular biomarker testing. So before I start, want to get your answers to rate how confident you feel in advocating for precision medicine within your multidisciplinary team or tumor board if you participate when discussing a breast cancer on a scale of 1 to 5 based on all that you heard today. Very good. Very good. Very good. So let's move to the last part. So obviously, we are all pathologists. We should play an integral role in advocating for biomarker testing. So we are basically the liaisons. We are the voice in that multidisciplinary team to ensure that all patients who are hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative, advanced breast cancer or metastatic breast cancer get this genomic testing. We hold the tissue, right? We are tissue stewards. We have to educate other members in the team regarding processes that allows us to procure adequate tissue for biomarker testing. And obviously, we hold the tissue. We are the guardians of the testing process. We have to highlight the importance of also looking back at previously ordered NGS tests. You know that in some patients, they may have gotten an NGS test. Then again, it is ordered. It is good to go back and see whether it was already there, which was not considered actionable at that point. That brings us to another kind of next thing. Yeah, so we have to advocate for the precision medicine approach within our multidisciplinary team. We have to advocate for the precision medicine approach by saying what these kind of abnormalities can do for hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative. And we are basically educators also, right, to the team in enabling the people to do the biomarker ordering. In my institution, the oncologist has to put the order sets. So obviously, they need to be educated. They need to be told. They need to know. They also hear from ASCO, San Antonio Breast Cancer Meeting. But we as a group also should enable that. So we are the ones who are going to help in extracting the tumor for the testing, in collecting the tumor, in enabling the comprehensive biomarker testing, reporting, and finally in enabling the oncologist to do the treatment. So in addition, can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So we have to ensure that all tissue samples collected are adequate for successful testing. And I think, one second. Yeah, so overall, I think it is our job to make sure that we give that opportunity to the patients to get targeted therapy and make sure that we do the right things from the get-go, from the time the tissue is procured, to the time we sign out, to the time we enable the molecular pathology department or a send out to get it done. And not only that, enable the oncologist to get everything in a timely fashion, also make a habit to review and go back to the result to kind of see whether we can be of additional help. So I think all this together makes it very important to allow patients to get the targeted therapy. So we come to another kind of suggestion. Okay, so what can help? A standardized reflex testing process can reduce the time for receiving the biomarker information. So what is reflex testing? That means enabling biomarker testing to begin soon after you make the diagnosis rather than waiting for the first post-biopsy appointment. That means proactively identify your metastatic tumor and get it going. And this way, you can help ensure that patients receive the appropriate care at the local level regarding the extent of biomarker evaluation that is done. and also requires regular checks and maintenance of protocol. Also, we as a pathology community should also keep up with what's going on with guidelines, recommendations for tissue testing, for rapid assessment, and new biomarker results. So with that, I come to the next slide. So looking back at previous results, so how does that help? So today, if you have a patient, and NGS testing was done before, as I said, looking back and seeing whether PIK3CA, AKT, and PTEN alterations were already there, but at that point they were not considered actionable, would be important to bring it up to the oncologist. So now we come to the final slide. The key takeaways from what I have spoken to you today is up to 50% of patients with hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative advanced breast cancer have PIK3CA, AKT1, or PTEN alteration. That's number one. And this combination of TrueCap plus fulvestrant is indicated for treatment of hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative advanced breast cancer with one or more of genomic alterations in PIK3CA, AKT1, and PTEN following progression or on at least one endocrine therapy. And third, be the voice in your multidisciplinary team to ensure that all patients with HER2 negative, hormone receptor positive advanced breast cancer are tested for these genomic abnormalities using NGS. And lastly, pathologists play a key role or integral role in biomarker testing and should be the precision medicine liaisons. They should act as the tissue stewards and be guardians of the testing process. I think it is really, really important for us to take this very seriously to help in management of patients with advanced breast cancer or metastatic breast cancers. With that, I think there are some safety information for this drug, which I think I covered a little bit. And I think, the overview for pathologists I gave a little bit, but I think we will show you some of those slides. But we can move through those and come to the feedback slide. Okay. So thank you for your time and attention today for attending this session. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the content of this presentation in terms of improving your knowledge about identifying PIK3CA, AKT1, PTEN alterations in hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative advanced breast cancers? We would like to hear from you on that, on the top question. And the second one is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how likely are you to adapt your testing process to get this testing done in hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative advanced breast cancer after you heard this session? I think if you can put down your answers, that will be helpful. Okay.
Great. So thank you, Dr. Krishnamurthy. Just in the interest of time, maybe we'll go through the online questions that we got first.
Yes.
And if any of your questions don't get answered, please feel free to catch up with Dr. Krishnamurthy after the formal session is over. The first question we have is, you mentioned ROSE. Are there specific scenarios or cancer types where ROSE is more commonly employed? And what are the factors that influence its adoption in practice?
So metastatic solid tumors, where you run into the situation of getting non-diagnostic results, people who have received therapy, multiple therapies, as I said, have more therapy-induced fibrosis in the metastatic tumor, and you may get non-diagnostic results. Bone metastatic tumors are very common to have such. So I would say that any solid tumors in a metastatic setting, if you do ROSE, then I think your non-diagnostic rate for molecular testing will go down significantly.
Great, thank you. The other question we have is, Our institution uses an in-house panel for NGS test or an alternative commercial lab than Foundation Medicine. How can we ensure that those tests are reliable and can identify TrueCap eligible alterations?
This is a good question. I think it's a very common scenario. Not everybody wants to send out everything to only Foundation Medicine. You may be sending to a different vendor, you may have in-house. The only requirement is that you make sure that the testing that is done covers all the regions to identify the variants that were used in the Capital O 291 trial to give the drug. So it is good upfront that the molecular pathology people who are in the department or the R&D people make sure that the coverage includes identification of those variants of PIK3CA, AKT, and PTEN that was exactly used in the Capital O trial.
Great, thank you. The next question is about PTEN alterations. What type of PTEN alterations are eligible for TrueCap? Are patients with germline PTEN alterations eligible for TrueCap?
So before I say that, I think I covered very clearly, right? There are different kinds of PTEN alterations that makes a patient eligible, point mutations, copy number alterations, genomic rearrangements. So obviously, any patients, these kind of same things that happen in Cowden syndrome, they are eligible to receive the combination.
How about PTEN alterations via IHC
Yeah,
or
this is a very
immunochemistry?
common question and thing that people need to understand. Unfortunately, IHC PTEN is not useful. The reason is that it does not correlate very well with PTEN genomic alterations that makes a patient eligible. So I think the answer is no, you cannot use IHC for PTEN detection, PTEN loss detection. You need to do the genomic testing.
The next question asks about, you mentioned TrueCap is an inhibitor of all three forms of AKT. Can you explain how effective in tumors with PIK3CA and PTEN alterations?
It's very good. I think I made it very clear, right, that when you have PIK3CA, PTEN, the final pathway comes through AKT in this signaling pathway. So abnormalities of any of these three markers will enable the drug to act and would help.
Right, thank you. Those were all the questions.
Thank you very
from
much,
the chat.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming, and I hope I made a difference in your understanding of this topic. Thank you all.